Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom!
It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, Adult Conversation podcast listeners. From irresponsible ejaculations to shiplap, this episode's got it all. Joining me is Gabrielle Blair, also known as Design Mom, and the person behind the viral and mind-blowing Twitter thread about the actual root cause of abortions. Hint, it might be irresponsible ejaculations. Gabrielle talks with me about how we prioritize male pleasure even at an extreme risk to women, and just how ridiculous that is. We also discuss men's aversions to vasectomies and how to talk to your husband about getting one rather than putting all the birth control labor, and actual birth labor too, on you. And then we totally change topics, and Gabrielle shares her design expertise by giving us easy ways to make our houses, which we never leave anymore, more functional and enjoyable during a pandemic. Weird times. Oh, and I also crack the code about why Target rules so hard. I want to give a special nod to my Patreon supporters. Thank you all for being my ride or dies. If you want to become one of my ride or dies, go to patreon.com/adultconversation. It's super cheap, but it makes this podcast possible. On to the show. Today on the podcast, you may experience whiplash with the different topics we've got going on. And it's because my guest is an all-around badass who not only wrote an amazing book called Design Mom, How to Live with Kids, a Room-by-Room Guide, and has a successful blog and social media following to go with it, but she is the lady behind that amazing tweet thread that said, quote, "If you want to stop abortions, you need to prevent the disease," meaning unwanted pregnancies. And the only way to do that is by focusing on men, because men cause 100% of unwanted pregnancies. Or irresponsible ejaculations by men cause 100% of unwanted pregnancies. It's a work of genius, and we're going to unpack it today. And she's also got 6 kids, so welcome to the podcast, Gabrielle.
I am really glad to be here. What an introduction. Thank you so much.
I know. Don't you love your introduction, including irresponsible ejaculations? Did you ever think you would be introduced with ejaculations?
It is shocking to me how often I say the phrase irresponsible ejaculations in my life for the last 2 years. I would never have guessed that was going to be a big part of my life, but there it is.
See, if I were you, I would be shouting this at my husband all the time just for laughs. And maybe it wouldn't go over so well, but I feel like you've got this piece of comedy and you just use it until the day you die.
Exactly.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining me today as we jump around to your different areas of expertise, like how to really prevent unwanted pregnancies, and also how to make your living space clean and bright if you do have a child unexpectedly. So we have both things covered. We have the here's how to not do this, but then if you do, here's how to make your house very organized and awesome. So all the things. But before we go any further, what do the listeners need to know about you?
I think that's such a great question. I would say I am often told, at conferences or in real life situations when I'm interacting with people, they'll say, "Oh, you're so calm. You've got a lot going on, but you're so calm." And it catches me off guard every time because I am not calm. My brain is not calm at all. All those things you're talking about, jumping around to different topics, my brain is doing that constantly. I'm just constantly processing and making lists and mentally all over the place. So it shocks me that I present any kind of calm demeanor to people, but there it is. That's what I've been told.
You totally do. Even in our first little exchange before we started recording, you do have a very grounded, very grounded presence. So I love that what's going on behind the scenes is a scurrying, a quiet scurrying. That must be exhausting, or is it? Is it hard to present differently than what your inner world is?
So I don't feel the presentation difference is hard for me, but I do feel like I have to manage what's in my head. So I bring a notebook wherever I go with a pen inside, or I have my phone handy to take notes. If I can get what's in my head out of my head and onto some other surface where I can refer to it later, that really helps my brain.
Okay, yes. And this relates to something that I was talking about recently with some people about, and I don't know if you have anxiety, but I was thinking about how overwhelm, irritability too, but overwhelm sometimes can present itself as anxiety. And for people who have mild anxiety, as I would call it, functional anxiety, sometimes that can be a harder place to be than somebody who has full-blown anxiety, because that's clear to everybody else. That's clear to the person that I can't live like this. I'm having panic attacks. But when you have somebody who has a functional version of that, it can go on for so long because it's so hard to tell what the difference is between, oh, I have an overthinking personality versus I have a mild or moderate anxiety. And that's something that I've been thinking about lately and talking to people about. And so I just wondered like what your take on that was.
Well, super interesting. I wish I knew more about anxiety. I do not, although I
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't want to know more about it. It's not great.
I do know about depression. I take, medication for my depression every day. And I know the two can often be related. So if a doctor were to tell me that I'm also have anxiety going on, I guess it wouldn't shock me too much. But whatever I do know about anxiety, I'm not recognizing that in myself. But again, I don't know a lot about it. So it's very possible.
Yeah. I once, somebody recently told me that depression and anxiety are two sides of the same coin. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Okay, so I would love to start with this Twitter thread. And I don't know if it's possible, but can you sum it up for us, especially the part about male pleasure? I considered reading it here, but it's super long. But it's so good. And I remember the moment I was reading it in my kitchen. So I thought maybe you could hit the major points for us. Is that possible?
Yes, I will do my best. It is a long, involved thread. It takes 15 minutes to read aloud, but I will do my best to give you the talking points.
Okay.
I spend the first part of the thread going through female birth control and why women might not be on birth control. Like why would a woman not be on birth control when she's sexually active? And I kind of walk through some of the complications and why it can be so hard for women to get birth control. And then I contrast that with male birth control, which is essentially condoms. And I go through and kind of talk about the advantages and disadvantages of female birth control and then of male birth control. And when you do that, if you've ever done that exercise, it becomes very clear how awesome condoms are and that they're just incredible. You don't have to, women are taking hormones every single day, even if they're not having sex that day. And their egg is fertile for 24 hours. But they're having to take medication every day. Their sexual partner might be out of town for a week or a month. Doesn't matter. You're still taking this medication every day, or you have a shot or an implant or something that's like feeding you these hormones.
Right.
And with condoms, you only need them for those minutes you're having sex. Like there's no hormonal side effects. There's really no side effects at all. They're much more affordable than female forms of birth control. They're available 24/7. You don't need a prescription. You can often get them free if you drop by pretty much any college campus, a Planned Parenthood, they're just really accessible.
Yes.
And so I go through that and then basically say, now, so when we consider that and how amazing they are, why wouldn't a man just use a condom every single time he has sex? Like, what in the world? That's just such a no-brainer.
Right. One of your points is that, like you said, a woman's fertility window is really so small every month. Right. And yet the male fertility window is every time they ejaculate. Right. We're going to say ejaculate a lot. So it's like, why are we making a woman do a daily intake of something that she maybe doesn't want to take, that maybe gives her lots of side effects, when the male version of this would just be so much quicker and with no side effects?
Right, exactly. So a fertile male is fertile every single day, all day long. Like they're always fertile. So it's bizarre, of course, in the history of birth control that we ended up focusing on the women instead of the men, although I can see why that happened. Obviously, it's so obvious.
Yeah,
when
is
a woman
it bizarre?
Is pregnant, right?
Yes.
So yeah, right. So it's not bizarre,
right.
But also it is. From a medical standpoint, you're like, why are we focusing on the one that's like fertile all the time. That's actually causing the problems here. But basically, I end up asking the question, so why wouldn't men use a condom every time? And the answer, of course, is because when men use a condom, they say the experience can be slightly less pleasurable than without a condom. And that's been interesting as that discussion has happened, because those who have taken the time to learn how to use condoms correctly will actually say, no, it's the same. There's not really a difference if you know how to use a condom correctly. If you have the right size, if you lubricate inside and outside the condom, your pleasure levels should be the same. Of course, a lot of men don't have the right size condom because they feel like they need to buy extra large, because that's another weird thing in our, there's all sorts of like weird stuff around this.
Yes.
So basically it comes down to men are choosing, and I don't know if they're consciously choosing this, but they're choosing to put their sexual partner, this woman, at risk, her social life, her income, her health. Birth can cause death. Pregnancy can cause permanent damage to bodies. They put all this at risk so they can experience slightly more pleasure for the few minutes they're having sex. And when you put it that way, of course, it's shocking. And you're like, whoa. And a lot of men who read the tweet were definitely kind of blown away, hadn't thought about it that way. And were like, oh, and you could see they're going, oh, I've done that. I have chosen my own pleasure, and if just a few minutes of my pleasure over the safety, well-being, over the life of my sexual partner, which is horrific. That's a horrific thing to think of and to do. And then I go on to say, look, if you really hate condoms, like if you just cannot do it, there's the pullout, and everyone makes fun of the pullout. And I know pullout is not as effective as a condom, which is 98% effective if you're using it correctly. But the Planned Parenthood site gives some stats on this, and the pullout method, again, if you learn to use it correctly, and we should expect everyone to learn to use it correctly, be responsible. That's not too much to ask. Women are asked to learn how to use their birth control correctly from a very young age, anyway.
Yes.
So it is actually quite effective. And it's this like built-in birth control men have. Like they can always choose where to ejaculate. They always get to choose where they put their sperm. No one is taking their sperm from them and putting it somewhere against their will. I mean, that would be sexual assault, not sex.
Right.
We're talking about sex here. So they always can choose where to put their sperm. That's always their choice. And even if they weren't using a condom, they could choose not to put their sperm inside a vagina.
Yes.
And again, I ask the question, so at the very least, why wouldn't a man pull out before he ejaculates? And it comes down to, well, it turns out men would prefer to ejaculate inside a vagina than, say, on their partner's stomach or into a tissue or wherever, an alternate location, because they would experience slightly more pleasure for the seconds that they're having an orgasm. And again, when you break it down like that, you're like, whoa, have we really taught men, trained men, raised men to be that selfish? And it turns out that yes, we have. We in fact have done that.
Oh, that is such an eye-opener when you talked about, okay, let's say sex on the pleasure scale is a 10. And let's say for some people who think condoms aren't that great, let's say that sex is still pleasurable, but it's like a 7 or an 8. Right. So that person is refusing to go down, to have their pleasure taken down to a 7 or 8, which is still pleasurable. It's still
so pleasurable compared to not any pleasure at all.
Yes.
And what they're putting at risk is just enormous. And we're talking about minutes of pleasure. It's not even we're talking about like a week of pleasure or whatever. We're talking about risking someone's life for years if a child is born. Oh my gosh, it's insane what you're asking women to take on so that you can experience slightly more pleasure for a few minutes. It's crazy. It's just crazy. Yeah. And, there's so much cultural baggage around condoms. Long before I'd ever had sex, I felt like I knew that boys hate condoms. Condoms are the worst. Why would I know that? Why would I even think that? It's just such a bizarre thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So you have a part of your tweet that I thought was really interesting. And you said what this means is a woman can be the sluttiest slut in the entire world who loves having orgasms all day long and all night long. And she will never find herself with an unwanted pregnancy unless a man shows up and ejaculates irresponsibly. That's at the heart of it.
Right. There it is. So I can orgasm, and any woman or anyone with a clitoris can orgasm as much as they want, all day long, all night long, as many times as they want, as many partners as they want. They cannot cause a pregnancy, no matter how many orgasms they have. The only orgasm that can cause a pregnancy is a man's orgasm. And of course, it's fascinating when you put this all out there because everyone has an exception. They're like, well, technically you can ejaculate without an orgasm. You're like, okay. I realize we're talking generalities here. Don't be pedantic. But
right.
As a general rule, ejaculating for men is a pleasurable experience. It's accompanied by an orgasm. So getting a woman pregnant is a pleasurable experience for them. But for women, you can get pregnant without experiencing any pleasure at all. Sex isn't always pleasurable for women.
Yeah.
There are lots of women that, have never had an orgasm, have never figured that out yet, or haven't been taught to, or whatever it might be.
Or their men haven't been taught how to do that well.
Right. Or their partner doesn't know how to help them. And also people are impregnated through rape and incest and all sorts of traumatic things. The woman doesn't have to experience pleasure in order for her egg to get fertilized. But the man pretty much does.
That's so interesting that every fertilized egg comes from a man's pleasure, but not necessarily a woman's pleasure.
No.
It's just an interesting thing to think about.
Absolutely. And women's pleasure is this, like the clitoris is this amazing organ that really only exists for women's pleasure. It doesn't seem to have any other function. The more they study it, the more they're like, oh, this just exists for pleasure. That's amazing. But it doesn't cause pregnancies. It can't cause a pregnancy. It absolutely can't. So the idea that women get blamed for this, women are shamed for unwanted pregnancies, they're blamed for it. The whole abortion conversation centers on women being slutty. Like that's basically what is happening there. And it's just such nonsense. Women, it doesn't matter if a woman's slutty or not. I mean, I hope she's having sex with people who respect her. Just for me personally, I hope that for her. I hope that for all women.
Totally.
But honestly, her enjoying sex, her having orgasms doesn't cause unwanted pregnancies. It can't cause a pregnancy. Whereas men absolutely can and do cause pregnancies with irresponsible ejaculations.
Yeah, you have on here, women enjoying sex does not equal unwanted pregnancy and abortion. Men enjoying sex and having irresponsible ejaculations is what causes unwanted pregnancies and abortion. Right. And gosh, you talked too about, let's talk more about responsibility. Men often don't know and don't ask and don't think to ask if they've caused a pregnancy. They may never think of it or associate sex with making babies at all. Why? Because there are zero consequences for men who cause unwanted pregnancies. There's so much here. There's so much to be angry about. And you have like lined it all out, just so perfectly.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it was really reading this. Obviously I had never, as somebody who considers themselves a feminist, I had never thought about it in this way. And I thought, damn, everybody needs to read this. And then I saw, how many people were reading it, and I was so happy about that. So I'm curious, what was the response like when this tweet thread went out? Did it go viral immediately? What did people have to say about it?
It did. It was the first Twitter thread I'd ever written. Twitter was the first social media I signed up for. It was because it was kind of the first one that existed that was accessible to everyone. But then my crowd wasn't really on there. I was this design blogger, and at first you couldn't even do images on Twitter. It just wasn't a visual thing.
Yeah.
And so as my, social media career was developing, sites like Instagram and Pinterest were a much better fit for my audience. So I had a Twitter account, but I didn't really use it much. And then, like a lot of people, when the election was ramping up in 2015, 2016, I was on Twitter more. Like it just seemed like lots was going on there. And then I got this idea to write a Twitter thread. Once you're spending time on Twitter, it's its own culture, right? And like I don't think I even knew what a Twitter thread was for many years. And then after following people for a while, you're like, oh, it's like these like an essay in these little bite-sized pieces. And I don't know. Anyway, I was interested in it, and I found I enjoyed reading them. So I decided to write one, and this had been on my mind for quite a while, probably about 6 months. I had kind of written drafts of this. Wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but just sort of like had put my thoughts down on paper about these thoughts on abortion. So interestingly, as I was pushing publish, my main worry wasn't that like I might get attacked or there'd be trolls. My main worry is that no one would like it or see it, and that I just put out a ridiculously long thread. I think it's 63 tweets, which is just gross, way too long for a Twitter thread, as I understand now. I try to keep my newer threads much shorter. But
it's great.
But anyway, like I was just like, so I had just, my whole thing was pride, was like, am I going to need to go and quickly delete as fast as I can 63 tweets? Because people are like,
that's a lot of work.
Heck is this? Yeah, like, is this just like ridiculous? So that was really the thing on my mind. But I didn't have to do that. It went off like immediately. Like it was like so fast. It was sort of shocked me because I didn't have a massive following. So basically it went right away and it was intense. I had been online for many years. I've had things go viral on Pinterest many times. I've had, very popular posts on Facebook and Instagram, but I've never had anything happen like this on Twitter. And it's just its own beast. It's just so different than every other social media where I don't know, at least for me, I'm much more like connected in real life to the people on those platforms. Twitter, it's just complete strangers, just absolute strangers. Right. It was overwhelming for sure. Exciting too, tons of phone calls from in real life friends that were seeing this happen and so excited. Yeah. News, getting lots of reporters getting in touch with me. So that was all really exciting. And then I had a delightful time just getting on and like arguing with people. Like it was so fun for me because the arguments were so dumb. I mean, like the arguments would come from typically a man that was just
right.
Didn't want to wear condoms or was feeling guilty because he
yes, right.
Because he had a girlfriend that he's having sex with and he basically has left the whole birth control responsibility on her and is
which is most guys.
Which is most guys. And it's never even occurred to him it should be the other way around or that at least should be shared for goodness sake. Right. And anyway, so a lot of men feeling kind of threatened, but they don't really have an argument. There's not a lot to argue in the thread. That it's not like I was making stuff up. You can't really argue like men's birth control is much harder to get than women's birth control. Right. It's just not, so people would try and argue with it and there was just nothing there. And I had a great time just being as sassy as I wanted to, which is lovely. And it's a very different personality than I usually express in these other forums, like on my blog or whatever. I'm not sassy. I would never cuss, although on Twitter I'll cuss all the time. Like it's just like I don't know. It's just a very different world. Yeah, that's cool that you get to be in both worlds. That you get to be like a couple different versions of yourself get to exist in different platforms. Right. So that really also was a turning point where I let my blog readers and my Instagram readers understand that. And I've given them hints of this. I mean, I've always talked about current events on my blog and things like that, but I don't know that they'd ever heard me say irresponsible ejaculations or, like some of this stuff. Right, yeah. And so they're like, I thought we were talking about Shiplap. Wait a minute. Right. So it's definitely a turning point where the blog readership, they either had to decide, okay, she's not, holding back anything anymore. Like maybe I was holding back a little bit. Now she's not holding back anything. Do I still want to stick around or is this like too real for me? Yeah. And generally they stuck around. In fact, my readership has grown in huge ways, starting with that thread. That's just, that so speaks to the authenticity. It's like you lose some people when you do these things, but then the other people that you gain, to me, it feels so worth it. And there's another piece of this that I'm interested in and that struck me, the thing that struck me was that, is that you're Mormon. And I was surprised that such a progressive point of view would come, especially around abortion, would come from a Mormon woman. And so are you an anomaly in your faith, or is there an insurgent of feminist Mormon women? And how did your community react? That's a great question. Yeah, I never have hidden that I'm a Mormon. In fact, I start that whole thread with, I'm a Mormon. Yes. Like it's like in the first sentence. So which is like, if this lady's saying it, we all need to listen because historically, as far as I've understood, Mormons are very conservative about abortion. Yeah, totally. So I was very intentional about including that. I included in the first sentence that I have 6 kids. So to give you a sense of like, I'm aware of how pregnancies happen and like how all that works. I know what a pregnancy is, that I'm a Mormon because I knew that conservatives who might not be willing to listen to any kind of discussion about abortion that wasn't like, it has to be illegal. Yeah. would be more open-minded to listen to me if they thought, oh, this is going to be someone, I'm doing air quotes, on my side. And it's actually an argument that a lot of conservatives loved and that a lot of liberals loved. The conservatives like it because it's like real ways to reduce abortion. Ask men to step up. Like, this is the only way we can really reduce abortion. And liberals like it because it takes all the onus off making laws about women's bodies. You don't have to you don't have to even change the existing world. You don't have to do anything to abortion laws. They wouldn't matter anymore if you take this other direction, right? Like, it just wouldn't matter. So it really was quite well received overall. And I learned very quickly how to block and mute and, use the tools I had at my,
yes,
to manage it. And so that was great. As far as Mormons go, you ask if there's this feminist insurgency. And yeah, kind of there's a very large and strong, I wouldn't call it an insurgency though. It's just a matter of fact part of Mormonism. It's a funny thing because we have these, very prescribed generals you're taught and things like that, but you're also really pushed to get an education. And what happens when you go out and get a bachelor's and then a master's and a PhD or a medical school or law degree, which so many Mormon women have really great educations? Well, you learn other perspectives, right?
Right.
Anyway, so you have a lot of really educated Mormon women who can definitely identify as feminists. And since blogging started, at the very early beginning of blogs, there have been quite a few progressive Mormon blogs that were kind of group blogs by Mormon scholars, by Mormon feminists. And so this has been existed for a long time and nothing new. And I was right there with them from the beginning. So
wow.
In general, there was a great response from many Mormons, but other Mormons were very stressed out by it. They just felt like I wasn't representing them correctly or who knows what. And they'd say, I can't believe you haven't been excommunicated or something. And I'd say, please point out the thing in the thread that you feel goes against Mormon doctrine.
Yeah.
Because there's absolutely nothing in the thread that goes against Mormon doctrine. Something Mormons forget, conservative Mormons who don't want to look closely at the religion, is that the Mormon take on abortion is pro-legal abortion. I mean, I think an approach that many churches have that are basically yeah, we hope you don't ever have to get an abortion. And we don't really want you to get an abortion. But of course, we understand there are times when women need to get abortions and they, incest or health of the mother or whatever it might be, or rape. And I know that's not an unusual stance. I know that's, again, there are many groups that take that same stance. But that stance is pro-legal abortion. If you can't have those exceptions unless abortion is legal, those are legal abortions. An abortion because of rape or incest or health of the mother is a legal abortion. So when Mormons will argue with me, I'll go, do you support the church's current stance on abortion? If you do, you are pro-legal abortion. So I'm not sure what to tell you with it, but that's the liberal view. You are pro-legal abortion. And the other thing is, I'll try and tell them is, trying to explain to them that abortions go down under Democratic leadership because we understand that birth control, if it's widely available and free, it lowers unwanted pregnancies. That's all and I'm talking about all forms of birth control, all the free condoms, all the free pills, whatever you need is going to lower abortion rates. And so under Democratic leadership, abortion goes down. And so, hey, conservative Mormons, if abortion is your key political issue, then logically you have to vote Democrat. It's the only way to go. They don't always love hearing that.
No, I'm sure not. And so it sounds like what you're saying too is that it's so interesting because the Mormon women that you're talking about that are supported to get a great education, and then as they become more educated, they're like, wait a minute, I get to be more in the world than maybe what the religion has pigeonholed me as. Mm-hmm. So, but it seems, the interesting part to me seems that these women, and of course there are some who get out of the religion, but it seems like the women stick around because there's probably a lot that's really great about it that they love and they've grown up in. But they're like, you know what? I'm just not going to do the parts I don't like, but I'm going to be in it for the parts that I do like. Does that sound right?
A little bit. I mean, so it's Mormonism is this full lifestyle situation. It's not a I go to church twice a year thing. It's not,
Right, yeah.
like it's a pretty involved thing. When we're in France, it's not as involved. It's just a smaller presence here. But in the US, I thought of it as like, it's a 20-hour-a-week job. Like it's involved between your kids' activities and your activities. And you have like assignments at church called callings, where maybe you're in charge of music, or you're in charge of teaching this age group, or you're in charge of girls camp in the summer, or, for the teen girls, or, whatever it might be, or you're in charge of service projects. It's just a lot of involvement, and the whole family usually has different assignments, and there's just a lot going on. And we really do, like, Mormons love service. So you're out there at the homeless shelter, and you're preparing meals, and you're, delivering groceries, and someone's having a baby and you're taking them a meal. And, oh, the church needs to be cleaned. Like, Mormons clean their own, like, they do their own kind of janitorial work. So you go take your turn. Everyone takes a turn cleaning the church. And there's a youth center down the hill that needs yard work and landscaping, and we'll take the day. And, the whole congregation goes and does all the landscaping. Like, that's just like part of life as a Mormon.
So that sounds like what the draw is for people, and a reason not to leave. Because in my mind, I think, how do you make peace with, or how do you reckon with being a part of a religion that doesn't treat women equally? But so it's like, how does somebody stay with that? But then it also seems like it's sort of acceptable, from what you're saying, to still be in it and to still do all those things and to still get all the benefits of it. But like I was saying before, but like, you don't have to believe all of those ways, and you certainly don't have to live your life with those doctrines.
Totally. And there's more flexibility within a lot of that stuff than sometimes people want to sort of admit. And so women have kind of figured that out. Like, yes, it's encouraged. Like, they love the model of the women are at home and the men are working or whatever. At the same time, our leaders, like our church leaders, if they get sick and they're at the hospital, many of their nurses are going to be women, because so many women are in the nursing field. And so they'll make a point of saying, oh, actually, we love when women are working. Like, we get it. Like, we're so grateful women work, so there's been, they've really tried to lift the stigma of women working. And there's also this, you just have to re-educate everybody, but going, hey, even if you want to be home with your kids, and the feminist attitude is, do that. If that's what you want to do, great. You have the choice. It's a short time compared to your whole life. Like that intense time that you're with your kids, because they're home all day, is not that many years. And if that's your entire identity, what happens when your kids are teenagers and then move out? You're just supposed to still stay home? Like, it doesn't make any sense to act like that should be the whole focus. So no. I think it took not just Mormon women, but it's a conversation the whole America was having to have, and still having to have, about feminism. I mean, the Mormon church for sure is a patriarchal system, but so is America. It's not like if you leave the church, you're out of a patriarchal system, and not even close. I mean, so we can criticize Mormon women for staying in it, but I'm also like, well, I'm still an American, even if I'm not a Mormon. Like, it's not like I've lifted myself out of the patriarchy. So, you make it work.
And you can take what works for you and leave the rest. I mean, I think that's totally a reasonable and valuable thing, because it's not all or nothing. All of those wonderful things that people get from it, like, you don't want to just throw that away. So I think it's great that it seems like, that's why I was asking about this insurgent of, progressive women in Mormonism, because it seems like there's sort of an opening for that. And like, there's this is the new generation of women who are like, we like a lot of the things here, but the things that we don't, we're not going to let it limit us.
Right.
Kind of
so
awesome.
Basically it's like, hey, we're here and we want to stay here, and we feel tied to this. Maybe we've had a real spiritual awakening, and because of something we did at church, and we just feel very tied to it. That's great, whatever. But we're going to question everything that's not working for women. And we're going to be vocal about that. And we're not going to just accept it. And that's what's happening. It's not perfect. Some women, try and fight the fight and end up saying, yeah, I can't do it. Too much kind of cognitive dissonance, or I just, I'm tired. I'm done. One thing that I think really affects it is kind of how much of your identity is Mormon in the first place. And if it's really high on your list, like as an identifier, if it's like your number one thing or in the top 3 or something of your personal identifiers, you're going to have a hard time, because the church is going to do stupid things. It's a very earthly. It's a very earthly, mistake-ridden organization, as all organizations are.
Sure.
Maybe it's worse even than an average organization. You're gonna have problems if you're analytical or examining anything at all. You're gonna have huge problems. If it's less high on your identifier list, it's easier to let that stuff roll off your shoulders because I don't know. I mean, it's the same. I think if you're part of any group, if it's not a super important thing to you, it's easier to like, yeah, that's pretty dumb. Let's not do that. But it doesn't like make or break your soul. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. Well, and I'm curious too, the tweet that you put out, where did that come from, that understanding of that or that knowing? Did you have a specific experience in which you just realized that? Were you having a conversation
about
with somebody?
Abortion?
Yeah, like everything that you laid out there.
I remember exactly.
Oh,
no,
yes,
I remember the thought process exactly. So basically, like I must have been reading an article about abortion, trying to kind of understand the abortion conversation in America more than I did. Like, and I felt like I had a pretty good understanding, but like was reading more. And I saw the abortion numbers and they actually surprised me. It's a lot. It's like around 500,000 a year, I want to say, the abortions in America. And for whatever reason in my head, I don't know why, but in my head, that was higher than I expected it to be. So I really like the idea of problem solving. That's how I approach design. It's how I approach a lot of things in life. It's like, okay, well, this is the problem. Let's solve it. It's an equation. Let's solve it, And so my mind started doing that, going, okay, well, why would this be? And then so I started thinking about like, okay, if you can get to a doctor to have an abortion, you could probably get to a doctor to get birth control. And so I thought, so why wouldn't they do that? And I immediately could see why, because I have tried every form of birth control. Like I've tried every form. I don't think there's anything I've missed. And I hate every single one of them. And I'm simultaneously grateful for every single one of them because they allowed me to choose when I wanted to get pregnant. Like I loved that control and I'm so grateful for it.
Yes.
But I hated what they did to my body, what they did to my hormones. I hated it. And I no longer have to use them because my husband did the responsible thing and got a vasectomy, which all men should do as soon as you know you're done having babies, and maybe before, because they can be reversed.
We're going to talk about that in a second.
We can talk about that in a second, but like, so I could immediately, like when I started saying, well, why, like, let's just think about why wouldn't a woman, have birth control or be on birth control if she's having sex? And it was so clear to me why. Like, oh, I can give you 1,000 reasons. She can't afford it. It takes so much time. You have to get off work to get a doctor's appointment. You have to get off work to go fill the prescription. You don't have any money for the doctor's appointment. Don't have any money for the prescription. Don't have a Planned Parenthood in your neighborhood because the government shut it down, or whatever it might be. Or you didn't have a sexual partner, so you weren't on the medication because, again, it wasn't in your budget. Didn't have time to go to the doctor. All of a sudden, oh, turns out I have a boyfriend and now I want to have sex with him. And you haven't had time. Like it can take 3 months to get a freaking doctor's appointment. Like there's and you have to have a car, and you have to, it's just so complicated to do it. There's nothing easy about it. It takes time. It takes money. And then of course I started thinking about like from there, okay, so I can see why a woman wouldn't want to have, wouldn't be on it. And then I started thinking about condoms and really started seeing the contrast there between like how easy and convenient versus expensive and hard to get, women's birth control is. And then also really started thinking about the power dynamic that is present in so much sex, where the culture has told men condoms are the worst and that the men's pleasure is the priority in all sexual encounters. There's whole memes and jokes and literature about, the man's crappy at sex. He had an orgasm, but she didn't, that's the whole thing, right? So thinking about that, and then pairing that, like the men's priority, the pleasure priority, with the pressure that women feel to please a man. So we're not only like,
good Lord.
We're taught to prioritize the men's pleasure. We're taught to make sure they're satisfied. And part of that includes if they don't wear a condom or make it known to us that they don't want to wear a condom, we would feel huge pressure to let them not wear a condom. Like that's a part of our culture. And of course, I hope everyone can think of individual situations in their life where they can go, no, if I told him that he had to wear a condom, he would wear a condom. Good. Of course. Wonderful. But There's a power dynamic that exists where women can't say that
Yes.
they would be hurt if they said that. But also, that's not a thing to be proud of, that if you ask your man to wear a condom, you ask your sexual partner to wear a condom, that he does, that's not awesome. Why did you ever have to ask him? Why in the world wouldn't he provide and put on his own condom every time? Why would he assume that you're going to take responsibility for the birth control, either because you're on birth control or because you'll ask him to do it, like that you'll provide a condom or make sure he's going to put on a condom? Why is that the woman's responsibility to make sure the man's penis has a condom? Like,
oh my gosh, that is such like the microcosm of the macrocosm right there of like,
Right.
I can just like, you speed ahead to 5 years when it's like, why, if he's going to make dinner, why am I doing all the shopping for it and the prepping for it and the dishes
Right.
afterwards? If like, it's like everything is on us. It's part of this invisible labor thing that I talk about
100%,
so much
100%.
on here. But it's like, even in sex, it exists. I mean, it exists in everything.
And even in relationships that you love, like with a partner you love,
Yes.
that you think like this is a healthy
Yes.
relationship, there's probably some weirdness around birth control where he has never given it a thought or has never asked like, oh, do you need to go get the pills picked up? Is your refill okay? Is your like, even if you are on a prescription and are happy with it, I bet he doesn't give it a thought ever. And
Right.
you've got to like stay on top of your doctor's appointment, make sure you're taking it every day, make sure you don't run out, make sure there's a budget for it, all
Yes.
the things, manage your own symptoms of any kind of side effects. You're taking care of all of that. And he's just having sex. He's never even thinking about it. And he may be
Right.
a man you love and like wonderful in many ways, but he probably doesn't think about this. And I say this in the thread, but I should be more angry than I actually am. And my voice probably sounds angry now, but I'm not as angry as I should be because we raise men to be this way. Like,
Yes.
we participate in it. We think about sex the same way. Like, think of every movie and every book that prioritizes the man's pleasure over the woman's. It's in a million storylines. So it's like, why would they think anything else? Like,
Well, what you said about the medication, it's interesting. My husband went on a medication for the first time last year, and his refill ran out. Right? Because he doesn't know that you have to like do that. And he was like, oh my God, I have to like, and my doctor didn't even write enough, it's like, I have to go back and talk and I'm like, oh, you're adorable.
Yeah.
Like,
Welcome.
Yeah, I've been doing this for so long. I mean, God, what is it? Like almost like 25 years of this. And I have health issues. So I've got like other meds, I have multiple, but even just starting with the birth control that I was on when I was in college,
Right.
you know that you
Right.
have to be on top of it and you have to think about it before you run out of it, because then the whole thing will mess up. And you know that when you go to your doctor, you ask them to write you for a year of refills so you don't have to come
Right.
back. I mean, it's like
Right.
all of those things that he's just learning as like a 43-year-old man that
Right.
we just do silently. It's like we just know it. And I've had to teach him how to do this. Ask your doctor next time if he'll write you for more than 3 months
more
so
than
you don't
3
have to
months.
keep doing it. It's like,
And that girl in college that lots of girls in college are, that are managing all this, they still have finals, they still have their part-time
Yes,
jobs,
of
they still have
course.
all the same things, and they're having to manage this in order to be available in case a man wants to have sex with them. Like, it's just so bizarre. And the men have to have no responsibility in any of this. Like, it's all just incredibly crazy. And we just teach people this. Like, this is how we've decided how it's going to be. So
we're just managing irresponsible ejaculations. That's like what we were
Right.
put here to do, apparently.
Right.
Fuck,
And
that's
so,
not
like,
cool.
it's not cool, and it should not be something we do. And there's like nothing else like that where we're like manage someone else's body for them. Like, it's just so bizarre, like that we're expected to do this.
Gosh.
Anyway, so that's where my brain went. It started with, why would there be this many abortions? Like, I guess it even started before that, because it was like, I know women. I talk to women every day. I receive hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of emails, messages, DMs every month, right? I talk to so many women. And one thing I know is we are aware of our bodies and are like hyper aware of our bodies. We can tell you every flaw, every good thing, everything. We're very hyper aware of our bodies. Society has made us be, right?
Yes.
And I've never met a woman that's like, man, love my visits to the OBGYN, love mammograms, love all this stuff that we have to do. Like, no, it's all very invasive. Every kind of body thing at the doctor for women is so invasive. And I don't know anyone that likes it, right? I've never met anyone that's happy about this. Even when they're pregnant and they're going through, you're there all the time. It's just like, it's a lot, man. It's just a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking of that and thinking, when I saw those abortion numbers, thinking of that going, no one wants to go to the doctor and have anything done in their whole genital area. Certainly no woman does. So no one's like excited about an abortion. You know what I mean? It's not like the whole idea that like women approach this casually. I was like, women don't even approach a pap smear casually. There's no, we are very aware of our bodies. So that was really easy for me to see, like, obviously that's not true. Like, even if you've been told it's true, and I already knew that wasn't true, but here was me kind of logically thinking through why it wasn't true. And it was so obviously not true. And then from there going, okay, so no one wants to go have a gynecological procedure done, any procedure done, abortion or otherwise.
Exactly.
So let's walk back from there. Why wouldn't they be on birth control? Oh yeah, that's why. Oh, and then men, about pleasure. And then that's where my brain went.
There's one part, just to hit home the pleasure piece, that you have a great analogy. You said, what if you found out that every time you indulge in that favorite food, you risked causing great physical and mental pain for someone you know intimately? You might not cause any pain, but it's a real risk. Well, you'd probably be sad, but never indulge in that food again, right? Not worth the risk. And then what if you further found out there was a simple thing you could do before you ate that favorite food, and it would eliminate the risk of causing pain to someone else, which is great news. But the simple thing you need to do makes the experience of eating the food slightly less pleasurable. To be clear, it would still be very pleasurable, but slightly less so. Like maybe you have to eat the food with a fork or a spoon that you don't particularly like. Would you be willing to do that simple thing and eliminate the risk of causing pain to someone you know intimately every single time you ate your favorite food? Of course you would. God, that just, for people who need analogies, especially around food, to make anything make sense. It's just, it's so spot on. And so my next question for you, which you already touched on, is what is your take on men with kids who are done having babies and who say they don't want to have vasectomies? Like they're scared of the pain or something. I've seen it coming up a lot in my mom's groups. My husband, he's scared. He refuses to get a vasectomy. He's scared of the pain. And I just can't even wrap my head around it. And it should also be noted that my husband had his vasectomy a couple months ago. So,
well, congratulations.
Yes.
Welcome to your happy new sex life.
Oh my God, yes.
Very freeing. I loved it.
Yes.
So a few things. It's the same damaging culture thing that is telling women and men that condoms are the worst and that it's totally fine for men to reject condoms, which is the thing that we're all taught, whether we think we are or not, is the same thing that's like, oh, and vasectomies are kind of off the table. They're emasculating. They'll make you less manly. There's something about it that's going to take away some of your manhood or something. And it's so bizarre because for the man too, you're not going to risk anyone getting pregnant. No one is ever going to call you and say, hey, we need to have a talk. No one's ever going to do that. Like it puts so much more control in your lap, man. Like what are you doing?
Exactly.
It's a very simple procedure. Of course, if you talk about it, you'll definitely hear from someone who said, well, there were complications for me. And yes, in a sampling of thousands of men, there will be someone that has a complication. So it is a medical procedure. There's no women's procedure that's even close to being as safe as this. It's a very short outpatient thing. You usually are back in business within 24 hours is what people can say. Again, it can take longer, but read the literature. It's very common to be like, great, we're good with a couple Advils in 24 hours. It's very, very effective. You do have to flush the sperm out of your system for a minute. So you're even after the vasectomy, you might need a condom, listen to your doctor, but then you're just free and it's safe and it's wonderful.
And it's wild to me to think that guys are, and I get it because we're all human. And so, of course, when a guy's thinking about, I might have to have this procedure and I'm scared, that's totally right and real. But I had to have this conversation with my husband a little bit too, which is and I had a very complicated second pregnancy where I was in the hospital for a long time and it was maybe not a great outlook. I'm like, do you realize how much risk I have put myself to bring our children into the world. Not only that, but my body changes, my hormone changes, my bladder changes. I mean, so many different things. And you're like
not willing
unsure.
to do a 15-minute procedure.
Exactly. And that's really what it came down to. And I wanted to, of course, validate his worry because I know, I mean, it totally makes sense that you would be worried about what if I am the rare person whose balls fill with blood? Like, that's a terrifying thing to think about. And it's like, yeah, what if I'm that rare woman
who dies
bleeds
in
to
childbirth?
death? Yes. And remember that I was almost that woman. So it's like, I know, and I feel for you. And also this is called bravery. And this is the sacrifice that you do for our best life that I've already done like a million times. And so my husband's, this feminist at heart, and he so got it. And it was, and he did it, and it's awesome. I mean, it took him a little bit to kind of like feel back to it himself. But I see these, I see women posting about like, my husband refuses to do it. And I was like, how disrespectful.
That's an incredibly selfish person. Like, that's just incredibly, I want to just talk about that a little bit more. Like, if anyone's really struggling with that, put some numbers in front of him. Like, say, okay, this is how many men have any kind of permanent negative side effect from this procedure.
Yes.
This is how many women have a permanent negative side effect from pregnancy. It's 99%. Like, when you talk about bladder changes, stretch marks, body change, all sorts of things. Now let's compare super serious side effects that men have, like how many die from this procedure. Now compare it to how many die. By the way, no one dies from that procedure, from a vasectomy. But how many women die in childbirth? It's not a ton. It's way more than it should be. So let's just look at some numbers there. And then let's talk about pain. You go in to get this procedure done, and they are going to administer painkiller to you, and it's going to be, you're not going to feel this, right? They're very careful about that. But I also want you to be aware, all men and women too, that this one makes me so angry. The pain for getting a vasectomy this is from a doctor, is very similar to the pain of getting an IUD. But for women, they don't administer pain relief. So thousands and thousands, millions of women, I'm sure, I've had one, get an IUD without pain relief. Getting it taken out was equally painful for me. No pain relief. They're both horrific. No one even I didn't think to ask. They didn't think to offer any kind of
my
pain
doctor offered. He was so nice. He goes, I'm going to numb you up because why wouldn't I? I'm like, oh my God.
Because why wouldn't you? But it's traditionally done without any pain relief.
Yes.
And it's the same amount of pain, the doctors say, as you would experience if you had an unmedicated vasectomy. But vasectomies are never done without pain relief. Like, that's not a thing. And so I just want men also to realize, like, okay, whatever this pain you're afraid of, it happens to women systematically all the time with no thought. It's just expected that we'll deal with this.
Yes, and the conversation became too, as I was saying, if you don't do the vasectomy and I end up getting pregnant, so that either looks like an abortion for me, which is like a whole thing, and I don't know, would I even do that? Right. Or a pregnancy, which so that's 9 months because when when you really like show that to them, like, you would be willing to put me through 9 months and then, nursing and postpartum, you'd be willing to put me through that because you don't want to go have outpatient. But
even abortion, like even if you chose an abortion, what's a harder procedure on your body, an abortion or a vasectomy? For sure, an abortion. For sure, 100%. For sure. Like, by a ways. So either risk that he's putting you at, like, even if you chose abortion, even if you didn't, like, for sure there, you cannot compare a vasectomy and a pregnancy. Like, one is thousands of times harder, right? Like that.
Yeah, right.
Even an abortion, which is also like an outpatient thing, right? You go to the office and then you leave, or you may even administer a pill at home and then just have to deal with it for days at home. For sure, it's harder on your body, and the pain lasts longer. It has more side effects than a vasectomy. Like, it's just a fact. And anyway, it just kills me that this is even a conversation. And of course, it's a cultural issue as well. Like, why aren't men taught, like, by other men oh no, vasectomy is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Like that should be advice constantly doled out. Get a vasectomy as soon as you can. It's the greatest thing. It's made my life better. Like it's so easy. That should just be in every locker room, right?
Yes. And that's what my husband's urologist said. He said, you have to tell every single one of your friends about this, and you have to tell them about how easy it was. And because, and so my husband comes home, he goes, you're going to love my doctor. He said, I have to tell all the other husbands about how great it is, because it shouldn't be the woman's job to figure out the birth control. And I was like, okay, I do love your doctor. And yes. And so he was like, that's the thing, is guys need to hear, and exactly what you're saying is the story around it needs to be, this is not a big thing. Sex life is so much better. We don't have this worry. Yeah. And I think even guys feeling like, hey, I showed up, and after all I've seen you do with the kids and the sacrifice and the body and all of that hard work, like I did a thing. And even though it's like, it's a drop in the bucket, it's still a thing. Yes, I can contribute.
If you're a woman who's been on birth control for many years, I mean, talk to your husband and say, hey, this has been a gift to you that I've been willing to sacrifice my body, my hormones, all this, keep track of this. I'm asking you to do this. I've had to think about it daily for however many years. I'm asking you to do this, think about it for one day and never think about it again. Like, please. I've thought about it for years, every single day. Mm. And if you presented all that and your husband or your partner still doesn't see it, I mean, take it to, am I the asshole on Reddit? I don't know. Like,
right.
You know, like he's not a good guy. He's not a good guy.
Yeah. I think he's telling you.
Or he has serious issues that he needs to see a doctor about or a therapist about or something. Like if he really cannot imagine doing this for this relationship, it's so much easier for him to do this than for a woman to manage birth control every day for years. Like, period. It's just easier for it to do a vasectomy.
Yeah. End of story. Yes. Okay. So switching gears totally. Now that we've talked about, we're going to move away from penises, I think. Okay. So I checked out your Design Mom page and I loved it. And I saw that you had, what was it? Like lunchbox recipes. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the litmus test for if she's my people or not. And you are my people because your shit didn't have smiley faces. Like you didn't make scenes out of it, which I was so happy for. So thank you for that. So I have to ask you about this home design stuff. So of course, being stuck in our homes right now and having to use them in new and different ways, you know, like as classrooms and offices and gyms, for those of us with smaller homes, our house's shortcomings are glaring. And so I'm wondering, what do you think are the most effective ways to make our houses function better and be enjoyable right now? So like, how do we organize and beautify our interiors since we are all spending so much time at home right now during this pandemic? Right. What do you have for us?
Okay. So I would say, first of all, no one, I mean, I don't know anyone that can just redo their house every time they want to as in-depth as they want to. It's not it's a huge time consumer and a huge budget item. So no one can do that. But what you can do is pick a spot in your house. It can be a corner of a room. It can be your bedroom or your children's room. In one house, I did this with a hallway. In one house, I did it with a little loft and made a little reading loft. But pick one spot that you can perfect the way you want it. And perfect is what's perfect to you. So it has just the right reading lamp if you're trying to do a reading place, and it has a comfy blanket, or maybe it's a place, it's your desk, it's a place to work. Pick a spot. Maybe it's a place for your kids to play. Or when I talked about the hallway, it was a place to like put backpacks and stuff. Pick a spot and get it just right. A spot that if you're in that spot, if you were to sit there in a chair or on a stool and be in that spot, there's no mental list you're making of, oh, I got to change that. Oh, we really got to buy some bins. Oh, I really got to get the stain out of this thing. Oh, I really need a, whatever it is there. A lot of people do that. You walk into a room. If you're dissatisfied with your house, you're sitting in the room and you're making a list of all the things you hate about the room, all the things you want to do, your list of to-do, your list of projects. So pick a spot where you get it right, and it doesn't have to be a big spot. And it's your kind of mental relief. And you go sit there when the house is bugging you, and you go sit in your spot, and you can bring a cup of tea if you need to. And again, I've done this. It works with even spots that were designed for my kids. Still works. If I go and just need to like not hate my house for a minute. Here's my spot. And it's this reassurance to you that like, hey, I know how to do this. I know how to make a spot that makes my soul happy. And I can expand this when I'm able. And I can now, next do the whole room if I've only done a corner. And when I'm able, then I can extend it to the next room. And you can, and even if you didn't do that, it didn't end up expanding, maybe a move or who knows what.
Right.
It'll still calm your mind. And ideally, you really can do a whole room. If you could just get one room right, pick the smallest room or whatever it might be, or the room that's the closest to done, finish it. And then you have this place where you can kind of escape the house that's bugging you, which houses bug, when we're home all the time, they're going to bug you. So find
the
a spot
escape
where
hatch.
the house isn't bugging you. Right. In most homes, you can do that with what you have around you. Take all your prettiest things. It doesn't have to be let's go spend money kind of thing.
Okay.
And the second thing is try to be aware, spend a few days doing this as you're walking through your day. What things are bugging you? Do you have a trash can that every time you step on the little foot pedal, the door comes off its latch and you have to, or the lid, and you have to fix it? Or is there a corner of something of flooring that you trip on? Or is are your kids not putting their clothes in the hamper because their hamper's weird and it collapses on itself or something? Think of the things that sort of irritate you through the day.
Okay.
Every house has them, and try to attend some of those. Those are almost always very simple fixes. Those are design problems that you can solve, and they literally make your day better. They literally change your relationship with your family. Like every time you trip on that thing and stub your toe, you're now pissed off. And the next person you see, you're like pissed off, and they can see you're pissed off, and everyone's pissed off, and it can poison the whole day. It can poison the next hour. It can poison just a few minutes.
It's so true. I love that idea that like a trash can can make or break your relationship with your family, which is true.
No, it absolutely
it's totally true.
And your house is a parenting tool. It's one of your strongest parenting tools, and you need to remember that. And if there are things in your house that are messing your relationship with your kids, things like the hamper's not working or whatever, like it's worth addressing those things. And you don't have to address them all today, but kind of be aware of what they are. Even just being aware of them will make you less likely to let it affect your relationships. Like my son, we're in this rental now, and we're all sharing a bathroom, which normally we've had more bathrooms and we don't have to share, but we're all sharing a bathroom. And I bought I don't know what brand, it's a French brand, but it has like multiple colors of toothpaste, in one tube, like Aquafresh in the US,
Yes.
And he was getting irritated because he's like, oh, it's like all the colors get mixed together. Everyone, whoever's using the toothpaste wasn't doing it in a way that he liked it. And when I figured out what it wasn't like, oh, they're pressing the tube in the middle or they're not pressing the end. Like he didn't actually care. He didn't like that these colors were getting mixed up, right? For whatever reason, it was irritating him.
Okay.
So I just bought another kind of toothpaste that doesn't have colors, which costs $1.
Right.
And then the problem's solved, and he's not irritated, and no one's irritated. Like, you can fix some of these things. You don't have to fester. And some of these things that really bug you, and you might be like, well, that doesn't bug me. I don't care. But like, so help your kid get a different toothpaste. Like, there's a way to solve that.
And it's just less people complaining. Like my daughter and my son share toothpaste, and she's not great about keeping it clean, and he just loses it. And so I'm like, guess what? I got you. Your own toothpaste. And so we hid it. And of course, I think she found it a couple days later. But yes, these minor adjustments to look through your life, like what are the most annoying parts about this house or the things in this house, non-human related, and what can I do to limit those?
Yeah. Is there a fix for those? So that's all.
Right. Okay. So on the same topic, in your book, I noticed the pictures are so gorgeous. Oh my God, I want to live in all of those places. And I don't see a bunch of plastic toy shit everywhere. Right. So for example, that has lots of little pieces. So we have a toy closet and most of the stuff goes there. But then my daughter's super into these LOL dolls, and they have tons of dolls. They have a giant RV camper and all the outfits and all that crap. And it kind of just goes in a corner in our living room. And I hate that. So what do you do about that? And why are your pictures so beautiful? Like, what are you doing in those? Is it just simply bins?
So those pictures, of course, are not just my home. They're of hundreds of homes. So I do not get to claim all the beauty of them. But look, if there's stuff that you want to have accessible, but you don't want to be seen, there are cabinets for that. There are closets for that. There are things you can do that hide that if it really bothers you. But you can also say, well, this is what it's going to be. Like, you can also say, let's call it out. Let's actually get a little table for it and put make a little, here's her little like play area for this, and like almost elevate it, like
let's honor it. Let's put it on display.
Well, a
Let's
little bit,
draw
yeah.
attention.
Like, why not? Like, why not? Like, if this is what she loves, I mean, of course, we all want to say, oh, let it all be wooden toys and beautiful, whatever. But
Nah.
These phases, like, it's not going to last forever, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So really think about like, okay, well, let's make it as enjoyable as possible. If she's super into this, how do we help her celebrate that? Let's keep the bins accessible and help her keep it organized. And like, a clean area is fun for the kids to do too. A clean, organized area, kids are drawn to, they want to work in it too. So
yeah, true.
If you embrace it and think about like, okay, well, how do I make this even more fun for her? That's sometimes the way to go. And then if you've put effort into make it even better for her, now it doesn't seem irritating to you. It's like, oh, I chose this, I made this, and you feel more ownership of it. And
right. And now she's using the thing that we built for it, and that feels good, rather than like, why is this crap always out?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good reframe.
It feels intentional instead of a mistake. Instead of like irritation, it's like, no, this is intentional. I chose this for her. I can see she likes it, and I'm helping her build out this interest. That's lovely. That's a lovely thing to do as a parent.
Okay. I like that. You said in your book, the foyer rug is integral to our happiness. I'm dead serious. Will you tell me more about that?
Yeah, for me, it's problem solving, which I know I had talked about before. You could say this play table we created is integral to our happiness. Some of these things like make it work for you. And when I say that your house is a partner and a parenting tool for you, it is. Like, it really is. Like, you're teaching your kids how to take care of their things, their belongings. They have to know that their whole life. You're teaching them how to be organized, how to be a roommate, like how to live with other people, help themselves. You know what I mean? Like
yes.
Make it easy for them to put their backpack away. Make it as easy as possible. So it's like easier to put their backpack away than to not put their backpack away,
So
like,
true.
Think about that. Think about when I come in the house, you know what it's like to come in the house with a backpack, and you do something similar with your handbag or grocery bags or whatever. Think about, where is the natural place to put this down? Where do I want to put this down? Well, that's where the backpack should go too. So do you need lockers do you need hooks? Do you need a bench? What do you need that will make it really easy for your family? Like, really think through how does your family use this home, and make it as easy as possible for them to succeed.
This is how I look at my home, because I am a problem solver. I also love systems, and I love organization. It just feels like the pandemic is, you can have it work so well, but then it's like, well, I didn't have the house set up that we are going to be in it 24/7. So it's like switching in which way it's functional. Like, oh, a whole different family moved in, one that doesn't go anywhere and does school at home.
100%. And we're doing this in a much less intense way anyway. Like, I would notice with every new semester of school, and that's elementary school, college, and everything in between, we'd have to reevaluate our schedule. It's like the gymnastics lessons change. Now they have to bring a lunch on Thursday instead of on Wednesday, or who knows what. So we were always having to reevaluate the schedule every 4 months. Like 3 times a year, like, okay, what's working? Do we need to change childcare situation? Do we need to change driving situation? Do we need to change any of this, right? And so you're reevaluating kind of how the house is working and how your schedule's working. And that's all happening. You're probably not even thinking about it that hard, because it's just like kind of naturally happening. And then the pandemic happened, and you have to do it in such an intense way. Because instead of like slight changes, like a different day for bringing a lunch, now it's like, oh, we're home all the time. Like, it's just so much more intense. And so I've been doing these house tours through the pandemic. And people have had to really problem solve in a major way in their house, where, okay, I took a corner of the garage and I've turned it into a nice Zoom background with removable wallpaper that I got at the grocery store, like whatever it was they could do.
Right.
And that's just universal right now. And everyone gets it. To use every corner that you can, really think about it, move things around. It's temporary, but it still ends up being a year or two of your life. This is a really weird time.
Totally. So we're starting a downstairs, mainly kitchen remodel, getting new floors. And I think we must hate ourselves because it's like, oh, if the stress of the pandemic isn't hard enough and people being home all the time. Now we're doing a remodeling. And so that begins quite soon. And that's such an interesting experience because on one hand, the reason we're doing it is we haven't done it for 6 years since we moved in and we've known we'd need to. But because we spend so much time in our home now, like I said, all of its flaws are glaring. And so we need this to be more functional and we need this to work better for us. But it's funny because I love systems and I love figuring out functional, like a way to make things more functional, but I don't love picking a bunch of designs. I know other people, like they could look on Pinterest all day. And I'm the kind of person that like give me like 4 options and then I'll pick which one. But if you give me a ton, I'm just like, I just short circuit. Like the lady who's helping us with our remodel came over the other day. And so she's like, okay, so we're going to pick the white for the kitchen cabinets. And so she opens up this thing and there's like 50 different whites. And I just looked at her and I'm like, that's anxiety on a page. This is literally a visual representation of it. And so she's like, so which white do you want? And I said, the white one. Like the white one, whichever one is white. And so I said to her, which one would you choose? And she goes, well, we usually always choose this. I'm like, that's all I didn't even need the paper. That's the one thing. But that's been a trip because I'm worried about picking the total wrong thing that then I'm stuck living with. That was like a bad call on my part, which is why I have somebody helping us so that I can ultimately put everything by her.
Right. Well, you know what? It is totally legit to tell this person you're working with, which I'm sure is either part of the cost of the kitchen or an additional cost to the kitchen, to say, hey, this is how I work. You bring me 3 choices.
Yes.
Tell me the benefits and disadvantages of each one, and then I'll choose, or
we have had
2
that.
choices or whatever it was. So let her know how you work. That's going to be easier for her in the long run, right? She already kind of knows what she likes. So definitely that's just, definitely let her do that and tell her you need that and she will do that. And the other thing is like, it's okay to say, okay, I'm going to do this whole bedroom then from Target because they've already narrowed down decisions for me. Like I can go in and be like,
so true.
Wait, I know I don't like blue or I know I don't like these 3 colors. It looks like I'm down to these 2. Okay, what do they have? Super, and I'm going to just pick from, they've already narrowed it down and they have great designers and they have great buyers and you are allowed to do that.
Oh my gosh, Gabrielle, this is mind-blowing because this is probably, I think we're cracking part of the code on Target. And why we go there and spend so much money is because you have a limited amount of options for the thing that you want. And they're mostly pretty good because Target has great designers. And so you're like, well, I could go to Home Goods. I mean, I know there's people who go to all the places. I could go to all these different places, but like you're at Target and you've got 3 to pick from. And one of them is good enough or great. Wow,
right. And this is you knowing yourself. Like, that's great that you know what you want. There definitely is someone that's like, are you kidding me? That sounds torture to me. I want to go to every store and be good. Let them do it. But if you know, like, I this is not where I enjoy spending time, that's what Target's for. Like, or whatever.
Yes.
You can do the same thing at Pottery Barn or whatever store you like. They've already narrowed down the choices for you. It's totally fine to go in and say, I'm doing this entire room from the same store. You are allowed to do that. It is totally fine. There's lots of smart things about doing it that way. It's convenient. It helps you make the decisions really quickly. Totally fine to do that. You absolutely can do that.
Yes. Well, and have you noticed my husband, he is obsessed with like baseboards and crown molding. And then I was talking to my other good friend and her husband also he's like, oh, I love crown molding. Is that a thing? Have you noticed that dads love crown molding?
I have not, but for me, I would connect it to like the stereotypical thing that we love when men do any kind of woodworking. Like they're a lumberjack, they build furniture. There was like I feel like there was like a whole thing on Portlandia where she was like, there's a guy that's like a furniture maker. And so that all the ladies are in love with him. And he's actually like makes horrible furniture. Like it's just awful, but like, it doesn't matter because he makes furniture, like, I think maybe there's something there we love the guy out chopping wood and we love the guy with the table saw that's building furniture or doing woodwork. So there maybe is a connection there for men. Maybe they sort of have the same kind of instinct, like this is this is what men do. We work with wood. I don't know.
Totally. I also feel like it could be some sort of founding father fantasy that it's like,
yeah.
we are in the, not like the White House, but some like regal room from that era.
Hey, look, it is absolutely true that a little bit of paneling or molding, a chair rail, a crown, whatever it is, can elevate a room really quickly. And, that and paint are probably your most budget items that can like get you a big bang for as like when you're talking about like renovation, right? They can get you a big bang. If it's already a furnished room, I'd say your biggest bang is probably going to be throw pillows. But if you're going down to like paint and like construction, any kind of wood trim, the more the better. Like add that beadboard, add the whatever you can. I mean, if you're into that, why not? You can usually do it in a pretty affordable way. There's all sorts of tutorials for doing it on the cheap. If you're DIYing it or whatever it might be, and doing faux paneling, there's just so many options, and it looks great. So hey, if he's into it, awesome.
So last question for you is okay, what's your take on Shiplap? Do you feel like this is on its way out after the Joanna Gaines sort of resurgence, or do you think it's a classic, timeless look?
I mean, I love real materials, right? I mean, I think it's lovely. Shiplap's a very particular kind of wood paneling, right? But all sorts of wood paneling is still delightful, and it's exactly what we're talking about right now. Any kind of wood trim in the house. There's chair rails, there's picture rails, there's crown molding. You can do like lower wall kind of wood paneling, shiplap. It's all wood paneling, right? And it's like, we want these materials. They're beautiful raw. They're beautiful painted up. It's great. And
I'm having a visceral reaction to you saying wood paneling. So I feel like, is shiplap the wood paneling of this generation? Whereas when I was a kid, we had that like brown wood paneling with the dark.
And that brown stuff was like not actually wood, right? It was like some weird vinyl thing. And that's why everyone hated it. It was like super low quality. And we all had kind of crappy vinyl on our floor and crappy vinyl on the wall,
And it was so brown.
And then think of every picture you love on Pinterest of like some house in England that's like, looks like a cottage or whatever. Like look at every room. There's some wood paneling. So I'm saying any wood on the wall is wood paneling, whether it's like covers the whole wall or just like you see rectangles, right? Or shapes.
I just need to let go of my aversion to the idea of wood paneling.
And it's all sorts of variations. The idea of like wood trim, building kind of architectural elements into your house with wood trim is going to be around forever, especially if you're talking about an older home. It just always makes sense in older homes too. That just looks right. They look like Paris. They're lovely.
My husband will be so excited to hear this. He just got so vindicated. Okay, so where can people find you, your blog, and your book online? And just to let people know, you're in France, but you're an American. So you were here. Now you're in France. So you have all sorts of cool stuff going on.
Right. So if there wasn't a pandemic, we'd kind of be more splitting our time between the U.S. and France, but we can't travel freely right now, and we are in France. And we're in the middle of a big remodel here of a house from the 1600s, and it's awesome. And anyway, we love it.
Oh my God, you're living Belle's life.
We are, to 100%. It's awesome. So you can find me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @DesignMom, and that's where I am the most as far as social media. I do have a Facebook page, and I'll share to it whenever I share on Instagram. You can kind of share the same thing to Facebook, but I'm rarely over there. So if you want to like actually interact with me, Instagram or Twitter is the way to go. And then I write at designmom.com. I've had the blog for 15 years. I still write pretty much every day, and you can find me there as well. And the conversations there are always pretty incredible. I have, I remember doing a survey with my readership. It's been a few years. I should do another one, but I have like a really smart readership. They're just super smart. They're educated. They've traveled. They're interesting. They all have careers. They're just a really interesting group. And so the comments are universally better than whatever I've written. Their reactions and the discussion are always really great. So that's a fun place to be. And then my book is available wherever books are sold. You can ask for Design Mom. Certainly on any of the websites, you can find it. And we have a parenting book that's coming out, but it'll be like another year. So I'm excited about that too. But can't find that yet. And it doesn't have a title yet. So
Okay.
I probably shouldn't talk about it yet.
Okay. Oh gosh. And on your blog, also on your website, you have slow cooker recipes. You have lunchbox recipes. There's so many. It's like all the things. It was just beautiful.
There's lots of DIY stuff. There's a lot of before and afters. Every week there's a new home tour where it's an interview about someone's home, but it's also about parenting. And sometimes these are really like, designer houses, but a lot of times it's like very everyday houses, which is really appealing, and you kind of see how people live. Enjoy it.
Thank you so much for dealing with the time zone difference to come talk to me today.
I loved it.
Yeah, thank you. I had such a great time unpacking all of this with you. And thank you so much for speaking out about what's really going on with unwanted pregnancies and, taking that risk of, am I going to offend somebody? I know that wasn't necessarily on your mind, but, it takes bravery to say these hard things and to know that people are going to be threatened.
Oh, you're sweet. I did not feel brave. I have so much support that it never even occurred to me to feel brave about it. So that is very kind of you. But no one was going to reject me in my life that I actually care about because of this. So I can't even claim any bravery for it. But thank you.
As I was editing this episode, I wondered how many of you might have your male partner listen. I honestly see the same conversation all the time about wives whose husbands are scared to get vasectomies. So she keeps putting up with the birth control responsibility, and it makes me want to throw something. If we can educate men and truly show them how selfish it is to avoid all personal risk, yet get to have a family, perhaps they will see how lopsided this balance has been. I also think men just aren't aware of their privilege here. So if you're wanting to have this conversation with your partner but don't have the energy, maybe just point him to this episode and let me do the work. And I'm wondering how you all are feeling after hearing what Gabrielle said about our house being a parenting tool and picking one spot in your home to make your escape hatch, or one thing to make more functional so that you're not raging as much. What would that thing be for you? If you do a mental scan of your house, maybe there are many things, but what is at least one thing you could fix that would make your quality of life better? Whatever it is, do it, especially if it takes you to the Container Store, which is my favorite place on earth. If you enjoy this podcast, you will like my book, Adult Conversation, a Novel. It's a darkly comedic story about a frazzled modern mother and her therapist who go on a Thelma and Louise-style road trip to Vegas looking for pieces of themselves that motherhood and marriage swallowed up, while they are also tested and tempted to make life-altering choices. Yes, there are strippers, there's weed. One Amazon reviewer said, "From the very first page, I was howling and had to turn and read it to my husband. It was my life. The author's ability to evoke the real, raw experience of motherhood from the euphoric highs and the oh-so-lows is beyond anything I've read before. The grounding reality makes the engaging storyline exciting and cathartic as you feel yourself going along for the ride. Get this book and share it with your mom friends. Now." As always, thanks for listening.
Here I am back at the